It brings us to the TNA that we're having this morning. It's in Sandton, and our guest of honor is Susan Shabangu, the Minister of Women in the Presidency, discussing 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign. Let's cross over to Peter Ndoro right now. Peter, very good morning to you.
A very good morning to you, Leanne, and thank you very much for joining us wherever you may be watching us today from across South Africa and the many, many countries across Africa that are catching this program on DSTV. Welcome. We're in Woodmead today, just north of Johannesburg, and this is the venue for the latest in the series of New Age business briefings brought to you by the SABC, and today very kindly sponsored by 49 Eskom. And as Leanne was saying, our issue of the day, and in fact it should be an issue of every single day, is the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. And we're right in the middle of it, actually. We're coming towards the end of those 16 days. But there's been a campaign that's been running since the launch of the 16 Days of Activism last year, a 365-day campaign. So the issue really at the end of the day is this is an international campaign, one that South Africa has adopted in 1998, and we've added another layer, not just gender violence against women, but also violence against children. And violence is not just physical, it could be emotional as well, but we'll unpack that during the course of this conversation. It starts on the 25th of November and runs through, and that's the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, runs right through to the 10th of December, which is International Human Rights Day. And in between, you'll find Universal Children's Day as well as World AIDS Day, all very, very important days as part of this 16 days of activism. Also, the theme for this year's campaign has been Count Me In, Together Moving a Non-Violent South Africa Forward. And we'll explore that with our guests in the next couple of minutes. But I think what's most heartbreaking is the fact that we even need to have campaigns such as this. How did humanity get to a point where we beat our own, where we abuse our own, particularly the most vulnerable, women and children? Where did we go wrong? Why does it happen? What is it that we can do? We'd like you to share your thoughts with us, perhaps your experiences at Morning Live SABC, #TNABizBrief. You can be part of this conversation as well. But to lead us in this conversation, and a person who's been a champion in taking care of our women is the Minister of Women in the Presidency, the Honourable Susan Shabangu. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to you. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Peter.
Next to you, we have Mr. Mfanozelwe Shozi, who's the Chairperson of the Commission on Gender Equality. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to you.
Morning, Peter, and morning to our viewers.
Right. Minister, let's start with you. 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children. It's been running in South Africa since 1998, and I guess the big question is why we adopted it and what gains have we been able to make?
Well, I must say, Peter, South Africa is part of the global environment, and when this was launched by the United Nations, South Africa is part of the global community. We had to identify ourselves with this campaign, but also not just for the sake of it, but also recognizing that we are a country which is affected by gender-based violence in South Africa. And on the basis of that, it's also challenging us as a country. What is it that we are doing in making sure that we address violence against women and children in our communities, in our society, at workplace? So that's how we came about this particular program. And I must say, as South Africa, a lot has been done. Looking at the various legislations which we have passed as a country, since 1994, but also as we move forward, also having acceded to the various protocols, like the protocol on of CEDAW. So these are some of the issues we've made as a country. Look at our own justice system. What is it that we're doing to amend that? A lot legislatively has been done, but the biggest challenge, it's change of mindset, it's the attitudes, but also recognizing the various laws in the implementation. We still have many gaps. We've done a lot, but also the road is still very, very long.
All right, we'll explore how far we've come and what still needs to be done. But let me turn to you, Mr. Shozi, Chairperson of the Commission on Gender Equality. Now, some people might just think that this isn't part of this conversation, gender equality, but I know it's one of the big themes that your organization pushes through. How does gender equality fit into this conversation?
It's important that we talk about gender equality so that we are able to bring men on board as well. As the theme is saying, count me in. Men must also be counted in so that they become part and parcel of the solution to all these issues. Because if you look at all the stats that we have, men are the perpetrators of violence against women and children as well. And therefore, when you talk about gender equality, we're talking about relationship between men and women. And therefore, it's important to bring in men and women and converse about this issue. As a gender commission, when we do our own programs, we make sure that we include men and women in this so that we are able to deal with this issue appropriately.
All right, and I'm glad that we've got both male and female representation here, because I want to get the thoughts and ideas from both sides. And Minister, I don't understand it, and perhaps maybe I was lucky I didn't see it in my household. And how did we get to this point? How did we get to a point where we see so much of it, and that men think that it's okay to beat their women and to beat their children, or abuse them, even emotionally and verbally, and financially even?
I think, Peter, we come from, or we still live also in a patriarchal society. It's how we're socialized and how we're socializing our children. Cultural, traditional laws are part of all that which influences the current situation. Hence the issue of making sure that both men and women are involved in this campaign, but also how we socialize ourselves becomes a key factor. And one of the issues I've observed is that through this campaign, but also through change of attitudes in South Africa, one has observed many, many men, both young and old, who've been victims or watching abuse of their own parents, coming up openly, saying what happened, and that's what is influencing them. And I think you're right to say how we're socializing becomes very important. How we make sure that our children changes becomes very key. That is why in our campaign of 365 days, we're not only focusing on women as the victims, we also bring on board men. And that's why we are partnering with SANAC Men Sector, Men for Change, all the various women's organizations which are there to say they're there for change and they're agents of change. We're working with them in making sure that, given that they've seen the light, they are able to influence and play a role in changing attitudes, not only of men, both of women, because what we're looking at is what in the Constitution. Our Constitution talks about equality. It can't just be equality in a particular way. It's in all aspects, both socially and economically. Both women and men has to be treated the same. So it's a journey. We are not yet there. We've got good laws, but the doing, it's what we need to fast track and intensify in South Africa. That is why right now one of the issues which has happened, we have an IMC on an integrated plan of action which wants to look at this. What is it that we need to do through various advocacies, making sure that we partner with civil society, also looking at what the police or your justice system is doing in making sure that it can really bring justice to our country. Last week, we had a milestone, very, very good decision by the Bloemfontein Appeal Court in making sure that as South Africans, violence against women, it's not going to be taken for granted. We're not going to see it as just a capable homicide when it's so serious. So these are the issues which bring confidence to all of us, because it shows that our justice system itself, it works. If something has not been done adequately, we have a recourse that reflects a South Africa which is moving forward, but also where we can have hope in utilizing our systems.
All right, so it's been 17 years that we've been part of this international global campaign, because it is a worldwide scourge. What progress have we made in South Africa? Are our women and children less vulnerable in 2015 than they were in 1998?
Well, I think if we have to go back, there's a lot of progress. Because if you look at now in 1998, because 1998 we just, how many years? 4 years into democracy with the ills of the past, and we could not measure that. But the mere fact of that today, we've managed to pass various laws, but also women are able to have a recourse. Women are able to have protection orders, even if they're not conclusive or they're not so adequate. Today we have shelters for women. We have Tutuzela centers. It's part of progress which we have made, but it does not mean where we are, those issues are now complete or have created an environment where we don't see any more violence. We can't deal with the violence on its own. We also have to address issues of poverty, unemployment, inequalities. They contribute to this. So as we deal with the violence, we must also address unemployment, we must address violence, we must address inequalities. We must also make sure that we educate our people, change their mindsets. That is why we have the 16 days campaign, which can't just be 16 days, it has to be 365 days. We've had various programs since the beginning of this year, including religious leaders, civil society, in making sure that we work together in finding a solution. And I am happy that we're getting a buy-in from South Africans in making sure that we work together, including business, even if they're not doing much, but we're finding now there's more of reception in the various quotas of our society in addressing this matter. And lastly, I must say, Peter, perfect wedding. It's a reflection of that we are becoming alive as South Africa. We're listening to what happened, and the whole South Africa had this outcry. So it shows consciousness. It shows that we're moving somewhere, and there is awareness and education which is getting to our people in this country.
All right. Mr. Shozi, it seems that we have the right institutions, we have the right campaigns, we have the right conversations, and also the right amount of outrage on Twitter and so on and so forth. But when we hear someone being beaten up next door, when we see someone being abused in a taxi by a driver, there seems to be this inertia, this lack of wanting to get involved. How do we shift that? What do we need to do?
One of the critical issues, Peter, is around the issue of investing in the lower levels of criminal justice system. A prosecutor at Tzaneen, a prosecutor in a rural area, to understand the nuances of gender equality and the violence against women and the struggle around those issues. Because sometimes when you observe these cases, you could really see that these people, they only understand law. They've not been involved in the issues that relate to gender equality issues. For me, the other critical issue is making sure that the private sector, like the New Age, the ESCOM, they invest in this and assist government and civil society to actually amass resources to assist in these particular campaigns. But I think the critical issue is around the issue of prevention of gender-based violence. For me, we must invest more on preventing it rather than trying to treat it. So that we're able, as a nation, to actually prevent all these scourges that we're actually seeing around us. For education is also very, very critical for me. The Department of Education needs to get involved in this. Their life orientation program needs to actually assist our young children to actually know about gender equality and violence against women and all these other issues as well as discrimination. So those are very, very important issues. And I think the messages, our leaders as well, the messages, what we say about women and the narrative that goes around the country, around the issue of gender-based violence and so on. For example, let's take the 3 court cases. We respect the courts and so on. But how does the court cases, for example, on gays and lesbian, fuel the discussions in communities about the hate of those particular people? Therefore, we must be able to couch our own interaction around these issues to ensure that, for example, the alleged comment about the Shembe leader around these particular issues, for me, they're very, very critical, because if we are not protecting the narrative, ordinary people are going to take those things and run away with it and also harm women and children in this country. Therefore, we need to be very, very careful about. And also for me, what is also critical is the implementation of the laws, Peter. They're also critical as well. We must also make sure that when we implement these laws, we're able to make sure that everybody understands it.
How do we get past this culture? Because, you know, whether it's religion or culture, since the beginning of time, the woman has always been placed second. Whether they're told to cover their hair, whether they're told to wear longer skirts, whether they're told to not speak in church, it just seems that our cultures and our religions have engineered to make the woman the second citizen. And this has been over centuries. How do we tell someone who says, it's my culture, this is how I'm allowed to behave? How dare you write laws that tell me that I can't practice my culture?
All this, the fundamental issue here, Peter, is patriarchy. The relationship of cultures, the religion, and so on. And I think it's important for us to begin now to actually educate ourselves about how do we actually dismantle this monster called patriarchy. What are the issues? What is it that is actually informing men to actually do those things? And I think we must also begin to have a program around how to deal with patriarchal issues in a number of institutions that we find ourselves in, business and in our institutions, in the private sector, as well as in government. So how to actually, in our families as well, because the family is one of the very critical institutions that in most cases educate young men and educate ourselves to behave the way we behave, because we see our fathers, we see our grandfathers doing some of these things. For me, what is at the center is patriarchy and educational programs around that, and socialization of our children. And I think we must also change some of socialization, because they also brew the stereotypes of actually making men and young boys to actually abuse women and children.
Minister, Mr. Shozi spoke about the laws. We hear often that a woman wants to lay a charge, she goes to the police station, and the police don't take them seriously, or they use this expression, domestic, almost as if, you're wasting valuable police time coming with these stories. Why don't you go home and talk to your husband? How do we change that culture so that a woman finds sanctuary at a police station and not find further abuse?
Well, I must say, Peter, it's that we've got good laws. I want to emphasize that. But laws without a warm body, they're just useless. They're just a piece of paper. That is why it's important that the attitudes and the training of police and retraining becomes very important, because we have to acknowledge we're in this space of patriarchy. They come from a particular background, so we can't leave them like that. We've got to educate them, change their mindset, make sure that they respond adequately. We've got good laws. At the police stations, we have your victim empowerment centers, but if those centers are not understood what they're meant for, to give privacy, to give confidence to the woman when she's coming to report an abuse, it means we will not be able to deal with it. So part of where we're sitting as this department, one of the issues we'll be looking at next year is to go on dialogues, exactly to deal with what is going on the ground. Are our people, women, getting proper service? Are police responding adequately when they report their cases? And what is it that is not happening? So we really want to go down in making sure that our people do get proper service, but not only that, the police or the justice system itself is able to respond in influencing change, because if we're not going to be able to make sure that when women go and report on children, any abuse, they get proper service, and they're able then to feel that they've been adequately attended to, it will not change. The statistics we have, we are aware that when you look at what SABC says, they say there's a reduction. But if you live in South Africa, you know there are so many cases which goes unreported. That is why our national dialogues will be going to all areas of South Africa in dealing with those issues, but also make sure that there can be justice in our country and women can be treated fairly. But one of the issues for us, key, which we really want to see it working as government, we're very excited about the sexual offences courts. We hope next year we'll see a change in the number of cases which can go through those courts and bring confidence to women.
We're going to touch on a number of issues, and I hope there's a number of NGOs and experts here that can help us with some of these issues. But I guess as we educate the men and educate the boys, we have to do the same with the women, because mothers are also giving messages to their daughters, and also they're not being empowered to say, actually, you know what, there is another way.
Well, I must say that whether women or men abuse, it's just wrong. You are so right. I mean, also we women, we socialize our children in a wrong way. We socialize them by saying, you can't cook, you're a boy. That's why it starts, the problem. You are a girl, you can't make or clean the garden. So we've got to change our attitudes, because that's the only way we'll come up with a South Africa which is different. And also key, we have a responsibility as society, both men and women, to educate our children of good values, respect. It goes both ways. It's not a one-way thing, but also make sure that our children can understand and identify with their own needs. You know, the issue raised by Mr. Shozi of the LGBTI communities, it's so unfair. It's us. It's us who go out and say all these horrible things. And therefore, it takes us to change our attitudes, our mindset, in making sure that we even support, come up with programs as communities. We can say all these things. We have to live and act within our communities, because all these ills happens within the communities. So our campaigns can't be high-flowing. They have to go down to ordinary people in changing the mindsets and working with NGOs who are responsible. And I think one of the issues we'll be looking at is how do we mainstream and consolidate our services in a way that they encourage and allow women to feel confident to come forward. Because if we're unable to do that, we'll continue to report low stats. But if we really want to do justice, we have to be all over the country in addressing these matters and getting everybody. And I must also say, the church has a critical role, because it serves our people almost every day, every weekend. The people are there, so they have to change. Preaching is good, but also play a role in changing the attitudes and creating moral values, which allows us to create a country which is equal.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but Mr. Shozi, one of the questions that I need to ask as well, when we talk about gender equality, I guess economic power is part of solving this problem, because a lot of women are not getting paid the same, they're not getting the same opportunities, and that leaves them even more vulnerable, because the man with the money makes all the decisions. But we'll chat about that after the break. Get your tweets as well at Morning Live SABC, hashtag TNA BizBrief, and we'll also start getting questions from our audience here in Woodmead about this very important conversation. So stay with us.